Hi friends, welcome to the NPTEL course Strategy and Technology, a Practical Primer. We are in week 7 with the theme of Dynamic Strategy Equilibrium. In this week, we have the first lecture, the 31st in the series, focusing on the topic of generic industry environments. We have discussed the topic of industry evolution earlier. In this lecture, we will look at the same topic but in a completely different light. We have covered earlier that the industry lifecycle follows the lifecycle of the key products or services that are offered by the players in the industry. We also discussed that the evolutionary stage of the industry sets the strategic context for the constituent players. Depending upon that stage of the industry, firms may adopt different strategies tailored to the nature. Ability to forecast industry evolution and develop strategies that are suited to industrial evolution is one of the strategy's core competencies. This lecture summarizes certain basic concepts of industry evolution, identifies 5 generic industry types, and discusses the internal drivers as well as the external drivers of those industrial situations and the impact strategies of firms have on that kind of industrial development. Product life cycle and industry evolution was considered by us earlier. We said that every product can be plotted in terms of sales over time. And a product, and in fact therefore the industry, passes through 4 stages. The first is the introduction stage, the second is the growth stage, the third is the maturity stage, and the fourth is the decline stage. We also said that between growth and maturity stages, overlapping both these stages, we have a stage of competitive shakeout. The number of competitors in the introduction stage are few, in the growth stage many, and in the maturity stage also many, but there could be consolidation of players. And in the decline stage, we can have 2 situations again, fragmentation of the industry or companies exiting the industry. By the dint of technology, firms can extend the life cycle of their products and consequently the life cycle of the industry. This is the key reason why several industries remain in a state of maturity over the decades of their existence. How do we forecast industry evolution? There are 16 factors I have identified, although there are more than 100 variables which could impact the industry evolution. These 16 variables are extremely important in terms of guiding the destiny of an industry. Buyer demographics, income levels, both in the economy as well as in the consumer's hands, changes in buyer needs, economic growth constitute one set of key variables. Product innovation, process innovation, marketing innovation, and diffusion of intellectual property, factors within the hands of the firms and the industry, constitute the second bucket. Learning curve, scale economics, scope economics, changes in adjacent industries, which are the intersections of strategy and structure of an industry and a firm, are the third bucket. Certain macroeconomic variables and also policy variables such as input costs, exchange rates, government policies, geopolitical developments, and emergencies constitute the fourth categorization. Each of the factors has a very significant impact on industry evolution. However, different products impact differently the industry evolution. Here I have developed a matrix or a grid, 5 industries and those 16 factors. In this table, HS means highly sensitive, S means sensitive, RN means relatively neutral, and NS means not sensitive. One thing which would strike you when you go through this table is that not one single industry and not one single factor sport the NS cell, which means that every industry is in some way or the other susceptible to or is shaped by these 16 factors I have outlined. However, certain industries are highly sensitive to certain factors, whereas certain industries are sensitive to many factors. And the neutrality is there in certain industries and certain segments, but not in all. If you look at automobiles, the industry is highly sensitive to demographics, incomes, economic growth, product innovation, process innovation, technology diffusion, scale economics, input costs, and government policies. When you look at the growth and the state of automobile industry in India over the last 2-3 years, you will see these factors play out with high sensitivity as I have outlined. The industry is also sensitive to buyer needs, marketing innovation, learning curve, scope economics, adjacency of other industries, and emergencies. But if you take an industry such as smartphone, it is highly sensitive to many more factors than automobile industry is. Demographics, incomes, buyer needs, economic growth, product innovation, process innovation, marketing innovation, technology diffusion, scope economics, adjacent industries, input costs, government policies are all having high sensitivity and high impact on smartphone industry. Information technology, on the other hand, does not support high sensitivity except to learning curve, and that is attributable to the coding experiences and also the digital learning experiences and the need to upskill the industry. But otherwise, it is sensitive to most factors, but at the same time, it is not so sensitive, and in fact, it is neutral to demographics, input costs, geopolitical factors, and emergencies. In pharma, you will see high sensitivity to product innovation, process innovation, emergencies, government policies, scope economics in a very striking manner. We have again seen that pan out in the case of pharmaceutical industry post COVID entry situation. FMCG is a defensive sector. It is sensitive to many factors and highly sensitive to marketing innovation, buyer needs, scope economics, and emergencies. By analyzing each industry in terms of these 16 key variables, we are able to understand how an industry would evolve based on the variations in the factors. And this kind of analysis has to be done for every industry, for every product line, and if necessary, we need to extend the factors a little more than what I have depicted for educational purposes here. Industry not only will evolve, it will also consolidate. Industries will be in a state of continuous evolution, if not volatility. However, what consolidates the industry is a different approach. Industry is generally concentrated. That is, if 20% of the players capture 80% of industry turnover, then we can say that the industry is concentrated. If 100 players are there in the industry and the top 20 players take 80% of the output, the balance 80 people exist, but they are not having any impact on the industry. This happens because the mobility barriers are high or keep increasing. However, if the mobility barriers are low or if they keep falling, industry concentration decreases. When the exit barriers in an industry are high, industry consolidation is deterred. Long-term profit potential of an industry depends on the future industry structure. Because industry concentration and profitability are positively correlated, we need to look at industry structure and the concentration versus consolidation level of the industry to be able to decide whether this industry is profitable or not. We can also look at a case where even concentrated industries attract players to come in. It happens because of two reasons. One, because 80% of the players are not being efficient and effective in the industry, someone else who is wanting to enter may decide that they offer an easy prey for either acquisition or for overwhelming. And that capacity, that place can be occupied by the new entrant. That is one way of looking at it. The other factor is that the 20% of the players may have become smug, or they are having such high market that they are susceptible to erosion by a new player coming in with superior technologies or even breakthrough technologies. You will find the principles which I have outlined here in energy industry, non-banking financial industry, telecom industry, and biotechnology industry. In energy industry, we have high concentration. Utilities which have mega power plants dominate the industry. In the non-banking financial industry, it is difficult to find companies which are uniformly successful and uniformly capable. It is the pyramid of the industry. In telecom industry, it is very difficult to exit the industry because the assets are neither portable nor easily saleable to any other industry. Biotechnology industry is one where there is long-term profit potential, long-term growth potential. So we can look at the industry in a specific light of concentration and consolidation, apart from the evolution which we have seen earlier. We can conceive of 5 types of generic industries. These are fragmented industries, emerging industries, mature industries, declining industries, and global industries. Industries of this nature do not occur by providence or by natural development. For the reasons discussed earlier, industries tend to be in a state of continuous evolution, if not volatility. And the factors that impact this industry consolidation into these 5 groups will be discussed as we move along. The characteristics of the above 5 industries are different. The drivers of strategy are different in each industry. So are the determinants of sustainability and profitability in each industry. If you look at generic pharmaceutical industry, where hundreds of players are available, the industry can be looked at as a fragmented industry. The mRNA vaccine industry, which comprises as of now only 2 players, BioNTech and Moderna, could be seen as an emerging industry. BioNTech has partnered with Pfizer. Automobile industry can be seen as a mature industry, while thermal power could be seen as a declining industry because renewables are set to take over power generation at some point of time in future. Consumer electronics is a globalized industry. We can identify generic industry types as I have pointed out through this slide. Let's look at each of the industry segments in terms of certain characteristic facets. A fragmented industry is an industry in which no firm has a significant market share. No individual firm has the capability to influence the industry outcome. Each is as strong or as weak as the other. Indian generic pharmaceutical industry is a fragmented industry because it comprises several hundred firms and several thousand brands. Yes, it is concentrated to an extent, but it is fragmented to a greater extent. There is cutthroat competition in the industry and the viability as a whole is low. A fragmented industry, extending this analogy to any other industry, comprises a large number of small and medium scale enterprises. Numerous incumbents exist in the industry. The industry usually does not have a market leader. Therefore, there is lack of singular leadership. If you look at the telecom industry, there is leadership in terms of Airtel and Jio, of course, but we don't have singular leadership in terms of fragmented industries. Telecom industry, presently comprising 3 players, is an oligopolistic industry where all the companies could have equal power, but at the moment, both Reliance Jio and Airtel have higher power than Vodafone Idea. Coming back to the fragmented industry, many participant firms are usually privately held or promoter controlled. They have close ownership and control. And this is one of the factors which doesn't allow firms to develop on an aggressive path. They can't compete. They follow a live and let live kind of syndrome. The firms may be cost leaders, differentiated or focused, but that does not alter the industry dynamic. Firms' strategies lack power in the marketplace. As I said, because the characteristics of the above 5 industries, including the fragmented industry which we are discussing, are different, we need to consider that the drivers of strategy in each of these industries are different. The determinants of sustainability and profitability in each industry are also different. Why does industry fragmentation occur? There are many causes. One cause we saw was that the growth phase, the maturity phase have been gone through. Therefore, what is remaining is industry fragmentation. But taking that aside, low overall entry barriers, that is, many companies can enter this industry. That is the primary reason for industry fragmentation. There tend to be no economies of scale and there tends to be no experience curve in such fragmented industries. High inventory and transportation costs could cause fragmentation. Because of high inventory and transportation costs, local industries, local firms are supported in different parts of the geography. Naturally, therefore, we will have hundreds of companies, and some could be hyperlocal as well. And these cater to diverse market needs and with high SKU content. SKU means store keeping unit. Government incentives to micro, small, medium enterprises and the local regulations support industry fragmentation. They lower the entry barriers and enhance the incentives to enter industry. Too many competitors split demand into small, unviable units in a fragmented industry. Low prices and low costs lead to lower cash generation, and therefore there is not much ability to invest. Incentives are linked to revenues and investment slabs. Therefore, companies do not want to cross these and lose the incentives. A fragmented industry may face a huge shakeout once exit barriers are lifted. The antidote for industry fragmentation is industry consolidation. This requires firms to keep the interests of the industry above their narrow firm level considerations. We discussed this earlier, that there are two ways in which a firm strategy can play out. One, looking at the industry's interest as a whole, and the other looking at the self-interest of the firm. Strategies to counter industry fragmentation are feasible and can be adopted. Despite the characteristic constraints, the firms can pursue certain strategies to mitigate or minimize the impact of fragmentation. Within the constraints of fragmentation, a company can try to create economies of scale. That is, it could share the sales channels with other players. It could share components across models within the company and also across competitors' companies. It can share the facilities. It can share the vendors and channels. All of this will lead to some economies of scale. Another way in which economies of scale could be got was through experience of production. Continuous production leads to better learning and better economics. Experience curve is the name for that. Second approach is to standardize diverse market needs. A company in a fragmented industry may be meeting 100 market needs, but if you analyze closely, maybe they could come into 10 clusters. You can incentivize certain dropped segments to switch to the segments that are standardized, by which we can channel better fit between the limited production and the limited market potential, and that helps create better economics and also in some cases better volumes. The third approach is to understand the causes of fragmentation, which could vary from industry to industry, and address them. We have seen that low entry barriers is the primary cause of fragmentation, in which case the industry and the firms can raise the entry barriers by way of technology or investment. We have seen that fragmented industry companies do not have huge cash flows, nor do they have deep industry investment pockets. Therefore, this limits the extent of technology and investment that could happen. However, to the extent possible, this main cause of low entry barrier could be addressed through investment and improvement of technology. The fourth one is building of the critical mass. Market share is the key to building critical mass. Building of market share is important for firms in a fragmented industry. And to be able to achieve that within the limitations, again, differentiation could be considered as a viable strategy. And the fifth approach is to be proactive, which is to mean that the companies should be able to forecast whether this industry is going in for fragmentation. There are two approaches. One, become more powerful before it becomes fragmented and drives down the viability, and become a leader. Or understand the inevitability of fragmentation and move out of the industry. By doing this, the company can gain, and if the company is a part of the industry, head-to-head competition with scores of players may be avoided. So if you understand these 5 principles, a company which is there in the fragmented industry can keep its head above water. There are strategies to cope for fragmented industry companies, and there are also certain strategic traps. The strategies to cope are to centralize but at the same time decentralize. That is, there should be controlled decentralization. As I said, fragmentation may occur because local development and local catering of market may be required, in which case decentralization is the answer. But the resources are so limited that the same wheel cannot be discovered in 100 geographies. So controlled decentralization is required. Frugal engineering is one of the most important ways of coping with fragmentation. The other ones are pursuing of cost leadership, product and or market specialization, and selective integration. But there are traps in fragmentation. It is a kind of lose-all game if everybody tries to seek dominance in the fragmented industry. And if a company thinks it can do anything in a fragmented industry and keeps switching from product to product or strategy to strategy, the indiscipline of this action will ensure that the investments are further wasted, expenditure is further wasted, and viability is further threatened. Excessive centralization is a big trap because leaders would think that demand is not being properly catered to or profitability is getting affected. Therefore, the best way is to centralize the whole management, and that would actually lead to a trap. Wrong assumptions on competition, that is thinking that this company is superior to the competitor or thinking that that competitor doesn't have strengths, is a wrong assumption that could lead to unnecessary smugness or competition. And trying to compete with all players is also a sure way of worsening in a fragmented industry situation. So how do we then do strategic planning for fragmented industries? First, conduct a complete structural analysis of the industry as it goes towards fragmentation or when it is fragmented. Conduct also a thorough competitor analysis. Identify the specific causes of fragmentation in the industry, and as we have outlined, identify solutions for each cause of fragmentation. Identify how the potential solution will impact the structure of the industry for the better or for the worse. Explore options such as acquisitions or M&A for aiding the firm's competitive position. Unless firms in the fragmented industry display certain maturity, the industry and the constituents may face decline. Now let us look at emerging industries. An emerging industry is one that is newly formed or reformed industry that has been created by a host of technological and business innovations, and these alter fundamentally the products, services, operations, and businesses. Technological innovations create new products and services that make the existing ones obsolete. Autonomous vehicles and electric vehicles are going to fall in this category. Changing consumer needs. These require industries to restructure themselves to fulfill the new needs. Renewables is a requirement of new generation millennials. They prefer companies which are planet friendly. So consumer needs are changing. Consumer needs also will change in favor of electric vehicles in due time. And advanced countries with significant road discipline would prefer autonomous vehicles. So consumer needs could also drive the emergence of a new industry. Government policies, particularly those relating to net zero and also renewable energy, would dictate mandatory changes in product and service configurations or businesses. Airlines could undergo some changes when government policies may require more spacious aircraft to be made available even in the economy class. Massive changes in cost structures faced in new industries. That is again likely to be there in respect of all new generation technologies, where the initial cost will be very high but subsequent costs would be lower. We have seen how from an index of 15 the costs have come down to 5 in the renewable energy industry. Material availability. Control of materials by national governments makes for new sunrise industries. Those sunrise industries could be of alternative materials or same materials explored very aggressively by the governments to be able to overcome the constraint. Mining of cobalt, discovery of more cobalt mines could be one such area. Climate change, that will lead to the emergence of several industries and companies dedicated to the net zero products. Zero carbon products, digital products would be the new trends in this climate change phenomenon. The essential characteristic of the emerging industries is that the path is unpredictable and there is no specific playbook by which strategy can be developed. There are no normal rules of game. These industries offer opportunities to be first movers but also carry their risks. What are the characteristics of emerging industries? As I said, reformist public policy and passionate private enterprise develop emerging industries. They offer the firms a great opportunity to rediscover themselves as first movers. Even firms which are there in the maturity industry could get into the emerging industries and keep the next horizon happening. I have demonstrated a multi-horizon strategy wherein the established horizon is the mature horizon which gives the bread. But by getting into sunrise technologies, emerging industries can be created and futuristic bets can be taken as well. But these emerging industries are characterized by technological uncertainty, strategic uncertainty. The experience curve could be slow to come by. There would be high initial costs and rapid decline in costs is a bonus that happens. Disruptive growth is possible when we focus on startups and mergers and acquisitions. The 4 factors that are going to support emerging industry development are the following: government policies, incentives and subsidies. University research. Many startups are based on the university research. Global change mandates. And finally, flow of ESG funds and sustainability funds. The emergence of new industries such as these and the growth of startup firms are positively correlated. Some of the best emerging technologies are brought in by disruptive startups. What are the key drivers of strategic control in the emerging industries? As I said, these are not easily developed. Many factors control entry and mobility in the emerging industries. The primary factors are proprietary technology, access to materials and inputs, access to appropriate talent, ability to achieve cost advantage, and ability to bear risks. These 5 factors should be there in the firms belonging to the emerging industries to create that envelope of emerging industries. There are some extended factors that come with them. There are costs and challenges of innovation. Materials and inputs would cost high. Talent is rare and it is deeply sought after. High prices are not easily accepted by consumers unless there are mandates and incentives. Risks are there, but rewards are uncertain. There are also other risk sharpening factors. Promising technologies could be unproven. There will not be any industrial ecosystem to start with. The firm probably is the only entity which is trying to develop this emerging industry. So the entire ecosystem has to be developed by the firm. It is additional burden as well as a responsibility on the firm. Many times there are no industry standards when a new company develops into an emerging field. Product quality could be erratic. There are unclear regulatory approaches and standards because the governments are also struggling as to how to regulate new products, and the industry, of course, being a disparate conglomeration of innovative companies, is yet to come to grips with standardization. A firm wanting to assert itself in or more preferably shape an emerging industry has to contend with the above challenges. While the risks are high, the rewards of success, however, would be stupendous. The company itself could become the industry. This graphic is extremely relevant in this discussion. An existing industry has a cost curve, and over time the unit costs keep coming down and they keep plateauing further. But to let the cost plateau further, there would be a need to incur investments because the machines will become aged, they will be sporadically working, and in such a case, unless you replace those machines, you will not be able to get lower unit costs. That is the cost curve. But there is an emerging industry, this green line, which is coming up, and it rapidly achieves customer acceptance based on the reduction of unit costs, and it gets threateningly close to the cost curve of the existing industry, even when the cost curve is coming down through additional investments for the existing industry. Now, the existing industry may try to fight back the emerging industry based on the technologies that need to be developed to compete with the emerging industry. That will require investments. and that will lead to increase in the unit cost. Therefore, the cost curve of the existing industry will go up. So the existing industry, to stay in business through superior technology that matches the emerging industry, has to invest and therefore face the prospect of higher unit costs. Whereas the emerging industry is consistently and continuously improving its cost structure, and when the emerging industry's cost structure is therefore lower than the rejuvenated existing industry has no place to work in the manner it has been there. Therefore, the success formula for emerging industries lies in driving up value and reducing unit costs. And we can see that happening in a host of industries around us. Some existing industries, even if they sustain themselves with incremental investments, will find the going tough, because product lifecycle extensions don't come cheap either. And they will not lower the cost, they will in fact increase the costs. The strategy for emerging industries must cope with uncertainty and the risk of emerging nature of the industry. They should also face the reality that responses to strategies may not always be on the anticipated lines. To be a player in the emerging industry, a firm needs to go beyond self-interest. There must be a broader purpose for the company. Development of mRNA vaccines had a broader purpose of creating a highly scalable and simple to make vaccine for cancer. That was the passion and the purpose. But that passion and purpose led the company to diversify into making vaccines for COVID, which could scale up like no other vaccine type. That is the advantage of getting into an emerging industry with a broader purpose. So there is an industry purpose that is involved, just not the firm perspective. The company should be cognizant of externalities in industry development, that is the external linkages that are required for success. The responsibility also exists to develop the entire vendor and channel ecosystem. It has to be reinvented in several cases, particularly in autonomous and electric vehicle fields, and should have the passion and the resource commitments to be patient and persistent in the pursuit of goals. Therefore, a startup approach is required, whether the firm is a mainstream company wanting to be in the emerging industry, or a division of the emerging industry, or a startup itself. To be able to do the strategic planning for emerging industries, we need to identify the mega trends. We have to actually shape the industry based on the mega trends ourselves. We have to access or develop disruptive technologies. We have to develop a long-range financing plan, because results may not come in 5 years or 7 years, may even take 10 years or 15 years. Therefore, we need a strategic product plan which justifies the long-range financing plan, and develop an ecosystem transformation plan as well. So intuition, forecasting, persistence, passion, and technological innovation are critical strategic drivers for success in an emerging industry. Firms need to be focused even while being watchful of new developments that need to be integrated. Now let's look at mature industries. A mature industry is one in which technological development has reached a plateau. The structure of the industry has acquired a level of stability. Entries into and exits from the industry are limited, and growth has moderated. The characteristics of a mature industry are as follows. 1. It will have slow growth. There will be competition for market share. Consequently, there will be lower unit revenue and profit growth. There will be strong buyer groups, but they are relatively loyal. They had relationships with the companies for years, if not decades. Therefore, there will be loyalty. And the needs will be very strong, very clearly articulated by the buyer groups. There is also great importance of aftermarket. Warranty, spare parts and services are the 3 pillars of aftermarket support. But a mature industry is also characterized by stagnant capacity. We can do efficiency improvements, but there are limits to market share gains. There can be change in business process, but customer focus and digitization are the only 2 avenues available for changing the business process. There would be increased competition, and that competition could come from global competition, which will lower the profits. As I said, somewhat ironically or paradoxically, multinational companies tend to enter mature industries because they feel that market is defined and there is no extra country risk. MNCs, when they want to enter other markets, are conscious of the country risk. In the case of mature industries, in different countries, the country risk is minimal. Therefore, they would like to enter, and to the extent that they may have superior technologies or superior ways of conducting business processes, they may have a competitive edge. So there will be higher global competition in mature industries. Transition to mature industry requires incumbents to appreciate the industry structure and seriously execute the generic competitive strategies of cost leadership, differentiation, or focus. They cannot be random. They have to be choosing one or more of these strategies in a good mix. The strategic implications of mature industries have to be considered separately. That we cannot think that a mature industry is a haven of strategic equilibrium. Actually, the opposite is true, because firms in a mature industry are required to constantly seek strategic advantage over one another. Some implications are as follows. Fundamentally, mature industry enhances the strategic dilemma for firms, whether to choose overall cost leadership, differentiation, or focus, which will work well in a mature industry environment. And the levers that are available for mature industry companies are many. But how we apply with reference to the generic competitive strategy and the competitors is a matter of judgment. That's where CEOs and CXOs need to deliberate such that they have a mature industry strategy that will be competitive. Tight product costing and pricing, designing for manufacture, process innovation, vendor economics, cheap assets are important firm level, facility level, competency level levers. Selecting the buyers, selecting the export markets for greater canvas, financial engineering for low cost of capital and better availability of funds, productivity improvement, and customized marketing are the process levers. Lean operations, mass customization, micro-segmentation, selective divestments, and selective acquisitions are strategic initiatives that could help a firm in the mature industry become more competitive. Incumbents in a mature industry have to bring the full suite of management tools and techniques for strategic excellence and operational competitive advantage. That is the hallmark of mature industries. In industry maturity, we have many strategic pitfalls, and there are also organizational implications. The waters are very deep in respect of mature industry, because the stability, the stillness which you see with the apparent stability could be misleading, and there are many traps. First, unrealistic self-perceptions. Because you are in more or less some kind of market share equilibrium or market share movement within a band, there could be a self-perception that we are too strong to be defeated by any other party. And that may be accompanied by an unrealism about the competition. We could be stuck in the middle, that is, not following any particular strategy, and the investments on share building could be very unhelpful. We may focus more on short-run profits rather than long-run sustainability. We may think that mature industry cannot be modified into a growth industry. Therefore, let's focus on today and probably tomorrow and emphasize short-term profits. There could be irrational responses to competitors. That is, if this is my equilibrium, anybody disturbing me is doing a offensive strategy. Therefore, I must respond very strongly, and that could be an irrational response. In a mature industry, the creativity may not be a great strategic advantage. Therefore, trying to pursue creativity could lead to a strategic pitfall. Price warriorship is something to be avoided in a mature industry. Excessive differentiation and overhang of excess capacity could also be the strategic pitfalls. But in terms of the organization, people and firms should understand that in a mature industry, there will be only slower growth. Therefore, the career growth for people also would be slower. We have to have scaled down expectations from financial performance. The opportunities for innovation will not be as bad as they are in a fragmented industry, but certainly they will be limited compared to the growth phase. There will be concerns of greater centralization of decision making and process controls. There could be smugness, causing an inability to perceive disruptive competition in a mature industry. Human behavior and managerial mindsets are influenced by biases and filters. They adversely affect a firm's ability to be competitive in a slow-growing, mature industry. How do we then do strategic planning for mature industries? It has to be a structured process because mature industries are not going to change in a jiffy. They are stable. They may be slightly volatile, but they can be strategized in a titrated fashion. We should avoid the maturity traps and we should improve the agility. For advantage in current mature business, we should have structured strategic planning. We should deep dive for operational efficiencies and competitive advantage. Reconfigure organization and talent for such competitive agility. For future-proofing against disruption in a mature business, we have to identify the mega trends and see whether we can get into those industries. That is the multi-horizon strategy. We have to enter into strategic alliances to hedge against disruption. And finally, we should implement the multi-horizon strategy. It is a two-pronged strategic approach. One, development of the current business, and two, development of futuristic businesses to future-proof the industry. Let's look at the declining industries. A declining industry is one which has been continuously declining in sales over a sufficiently long period of time. It is independent of the ups and downs of economic and business cycles. Just because in a recessionary environment sales have come down for a year or two, it doesn't mean that the industry itself is a declining industry. Declining industries have special characteristics. Slower economic growth, which irreversibly influences the industry. Consumer demand, which is continuously reducing. It could be due to the product fault, it could be due to the marketing fault, it could be due to the quality fault, but consumer demand is continuously reducing. If you look at the edible oils, the demand for groundnut oils was continuously reducing with the worry about the heart-related impact and also the availability or the perception of new oils which are heart healthy. So there is a continuous reducing consumer demand for such cholesterol building oils, and that became a declining industry. There could be new product substitutions. Again, I quoted this example of edible oils, and there could be high cost inflations. And these lead to declining margins, reducing product lines, falling R&D and marketing costs, and dwindling number of competitors. When firms don't exist in such a declining industry, there will be high losses. And when most firms exist, there will be high profits. So two extremes are possible in declining industries. That is, firms decide for themselves that it is irrelevant, impossible, and inappropriate to stay in that industry, therefore they exit, in which case the profitability of the declining industry would suddenly improve. On the other hand, if each firm has got some reason why it should stay in the industry, then there won't be any exit, there would be high losses. This happens again when the firms are promoter controlled and employment as founders is a career option for the founders and their scions, in which case they stay and the firms stay. Different industries have different declining features, and many times huge losses are quite common. Windfall profits are also possible. Extension of product life cycle may keep the decline at bay for some time. However, when fundamental technological and product changes occur, decline of the industry will be inevitable. Structural analysis of declining industries is marked by unpredictability and volatility. Although the broad direction of decline is a foregone conclusion, there are demand conditions such as uncertainty, rate and pattern of decline, and structure of remaining demand pockets. Even in a declining industry, there will be demand in certain pockets, but the structure of that demand pocket must be understood. Causes of decline, whether due to technological substitution, changing demographics, move to other interesting industries, have to be understood. We have exit barriers in a declining industry, such as durable and specialized assets which cannot be sold to anyone else, fixed costs of exit, bundled product lines, and vertical integration. There are other barriers such as regulatory barriers, Lenders and investors barriers. They don't want any company or any founder to exit. They would like all their obligations to be fulfilled before such exit takes place. And given the nature of the industry, that may not be possible. Therefore, there is a kind of forced tie-up to stay in the industry. There could be emotional barriers, companies attached to the legacy products, legacy business lines, and the founder related issues which I mentioned, and information barriers. People may not be knowing that they are in a declining industry and worse is yet to come. Often declining industry cannot be assessed on its own. Although quartz and digital watches were the order of the day, the watch industry could not completely forego the mechanical watch segment. And it was good that it did not completely forego, because coupled with handcrafting, the watch industry, which is mechanical, is still a worthwhile industry. So there are 4 strategic alternatives in declining industries. The common perception and temptation that we should harvest whatever is available, that is, get out of the available resources the best and then leave. But the real alternatives are 4. 1, try to achieve the market share that is the best possible in a declining industry. Try to consolidate. Try to have some superiority over others so that you improve your market share. Second, niche. Create or defend a strong position in a particular segment. You don't need to be present in every segment of the declining industry. You can just be in 2 or 3 segments and become a strong leader. Harvest is pretty much kind of open book alternative. Try to maximize revenues and profits even while scaling down capacity and assets. Liquidate the investments and as much as possible and as soon as possible is the final divestment strategy. To be able to avoid any pitfalls in decline, we have to be careful. First, we should not avoid any study of decline. We should be very careful and we should be very intelligent in understanding the reasons for decline. We should never embark on a war of attrition in a declining industry. We can do selective war, but not a no-holds war in a declining industry. It is a lose-all game. We should also not over-invest. We should not invest hoping that one day this entire industry will rise up. That's not possible. And we should never harvest without understanding the clear strengths. And we should never undertake fire sale of assets. We should sell the assets before the decline starts biting us, not after the decline starts biting us. One of the most important requirements for strategy formulation in declining industries is recognition of possible pitfalls in dealing with the situation. A sharp awareness of the declining industry signs and prognosis of the industry is very much vital for declining industries. So the right combinations are leadership or niche, harvest or divest quickly, niche or harvest, divest quickly. Why are we having overlapping situations? Because there are 2 possibilities that are to be seen by companies. The firm which is taking the strategic decision may have strengths relative to competitors for the residual pockets of the declining industry, or it may still lack strengths relative to competitors for the residual pockets of demand. That is, it has strengths, it doesn't have strengths. The industry structure could be unfavorable for decline and it could be favorable for decline. Suppose there is some hope in the industry and there are strengths relative to others, the company should try to get leadership or niche position. Suppose the company has got strengths relative to competitors, but the structure itself is bound to deteriorate and decline. You should try for a niche position in select residual modules or harvest. If the company has no strengths relative to competitors in those residual pockets and the industry structure is also quite unfavorable, you should divest quickly before the going goes pretty bad. If the firm lacks strengths relative to competitors for those residual pockets and the industry structure is favorable for decline, then you should look at harvest or divesting quickly. If the company lacks strengths relative to competitors for residual pockets and if there is a favorable industry structure for decline, then you should harvest or divest quickly. So the mantra in declining industries is to minimize investments, not to raise exit barriers, focus on favorable market segments, and create switching costs in segments so that whatever be the residual pocket you are there, you are reasonably strong. As with other industries, extension of product life cycle may keep the decline at bay for some time, but when fundamental technological and product changes occur in that industry or in the adjacent industries, the declining industry may vanish at some point of time. Telex industry is one example. The film roll industry is another example. Global industries are very much the order of the day. A global industry is one where a firm is present in several countries by way of network product development, manufacturing, and marketing. Global firms take different hues depending on the extent of globalization. We have discussed Cage framework earlier. Let's look at the types of global firms. Those companies which conduct international operations, that is, which export in a liberal way to other countries, are international corporations. Companies which are present either in terms of manufacturing, marketing, or both are multinational corporations. Companies which have a global outlook are global corporations, and transnational corporations are those which are fully present in several countries. So there are two forces that occur. One, forces for local responsiveness. That is, if you want to succeed in a country, you have to meet local requirements. If you want to export a truck to Africa, you should meet African terrain conditions. On the other hand, if you want to export a truck to Europe, you should meet those power to weight ratios and the fit finishes that are required in that market. There are forces for local responsiveness that are either low or high. Forces for global control could be low or high. That is, to ensure standardized quality, you must do something which is standard across the world. If you are a pharmaceutical company and if you want to be present in several countries, given the highest level of patient safety, because human life is the same in any part of the world, you need to have one standard of product specifications and one standard of quality. Therefore, the force for global control is very high in such industries. But there could be some industries where the force for global control is low. If you are in FMCG industry and you are catering to the local tastes, there is no need to tell how the spices and condiments should be titrated, because topic that is expertise which is best left to the local forces. So when you have this grid, when the force for local responsiveness is low and the force for global control is low, you will have international corporations. When the force for local responsiveness is high, but the force for global control is low, then you will have multinational corporations. When the force for local responsiveness is low and global control is paramount, you will have global corporations. On the other hand, when there are forces for local responsiveness that are high and also forces for global control high, you will have transnational corporations. That is, they conduct R&D, manufacturing, marketing, supply chain in all the parts of the world, because each has got its own requirements in terms of the responsiveness, and each has to be subject to global control in terms of global standardization. So in creating these kinds of global corporations and this kind of global strategy, you have to follow a global competitive strategy. Factor cost differences among countries have to be listed, quantified. We have to understand the differing circumstances in each market. We have to understand the different roles that foreign governments play, and differences in goals, resources, and ability to monitor foreign competitors must be understood. Unilever, P&G, Toyota, GE, Amazon, Google, and McDonald's are some examples of global corporations from different industrial and business sectors. Of these, companies such as Toyota are truly transnational corporations with networked R&D, manufacturing, and marketing in several countries of the world. The shift from global corporation to transnational corporation could be relatively easy if a company puts its heart and soul into it. But a shift from international corporation to multinational corporation and from multinational corporation to a true global or transnational corporation could be challenging. The sources of global competitive advantage are many and varied, and these are linked to several firm and industry as well as economy and country related factors. First of all, the nation should have comparative advantage. If you want to have comparative advantage in China, you should use the comparative advantage that economy has, but also you should offer a comparative advantage in terms of getting into that market. Second, there should be product differentiation to be able to cater to different natures of markets in different countries. There should be global experience. It should be cross-cultural. It should be also one global standard where it is required. Product technology must be proprietary. Mobility of production should be very clearly understood, and governmental policies should be proactively dealt with. We cannot override governmental policies, but we can kind of advocate the right kind of policies that would make industry grow. So economies of scale are of several types in a global competitive advantage scenario. These are related to production, these are related to logistics, marketing, purchasing, and R&D. All of these economies of scale must be leveraged to generate overall global competitive advantage. The proprietary technology, operational competency, and economies of scale are three fundamental drivers for global competitive advantage for any firm. Global competitive advantage cannot be easily obtained. There tend to be lots of impediments. Globally oriented firms face several challenges compared to nationally oriented industries. Typically, nationally oriented industries will be strong, entrenched, and they would have turf protection in certain cases. Therefore, if a global company is trying to compete in 60 markets of the world, it has to face 60 strong domestic players or 120 strong domestic players, which is a challenging task. Therefore, there would be three types of impediments: economic, managerial, and institutional. What are the economic impediments? The product needs will be highly diverse and they would grow more than proportionate. It is not just one country to two country. The product complexity could be 1x to 10x. That's the kind of change. Supply chain and logistics costs will shoot up. Distribution channel challenges will be some of the biggest challenges that are faced when a company enters a new market. Talent has to be multifunctional. You don't get talent of different functions in all the regions. Some may be manufacturing oriented, some may be oriented towards documentation, some may be IT oriented, but to get truly well-rounded talent mix is a challenge. New market. We have to be able to service a product in the multinational setting. Segmentation will be complex. Just because a product is segmented in a particular manner in one country, it cannot be the same. And product strategy, if it is developed with the largest market, may not serve well in the smaller markets. So there is a problem of economy in this. Lack of standardized world demand. Volatility of demand is a given in multinational environment. Macroeconomic variations could be aplenty. Managerial impediments are in terms of the diverse managerial requirements along with the cultural barriers that happen. Certain services have to be nationally offered. You may be able to do direct to consumer marketing or have pyramid structures in certain geographies, but it may not be possible in certain other geographies. It may be easy to operate in crypto coins in certain geographies, but it won't be possible in certain other geographies. Even the use of credit cards may not be as liberal in some countries as it is in some other countries. Tokenization could be required as in India at some point of time in future, so that misuse of credit cards or debit cards is avoided. Rapidly changing technology comes up with its own managerial impediments, and lack of standardized world demand also leads to more managerial impediments. Institutionally, governmental policies are impediments. Sometimes they are like opening up of the space, but if the policies are not fully well structured, then there could be issues. Today's production-linked incentive schemes are proving to be great incentives for companies to come into the country and set up their manufacturing establishments. What is being done in respect of semiconductors is once in industrial lifetime achievement in our country. So far, no government has thought about stimulating semiconductor manufacture in India. While chips were encouraged, chips were never encouraged. And that scenario is changing in India, which is for the good of the country and the competitive advantage of the country. There will be perceptual or resource impediments. People may think that India is power short or India is water short, but they may not be real. There may be ways and means to secure these resources. There could be complex segmentation. Understanding the local market, local talent pool, and the state governmental differential policies could be a challenge. Again, lack of standardized world demand could lead to different institutional impediments in different countries. Each of these factors would affect different companies in different industries differently. Over and above these, the competitive moves by domestically oriented firms, as I said in the beginning of this slide discussion, may create more barriers and impediments for global firms seeking entry. But globalization is irreversible. Despite the challenges and impediments, globalization has come to stay as an irreversible phenomenon. Not only that, changes in one country affect global industries and firms operating in other industries. What are the environmental triggers for globalization? Everybody understands the importance and the advantage of global scale and scope. It goes without saying. In some product lines, global demand is 10x or 100x of the domestic demand. So it makes sense to go global. And the earning capacity in dollars or euros is 75 times or 85 times that of Indian rupee. So if you are able to export or if you are able to operate in global canvas, you'll be having better revenue possibility. And having a global supply chain which spans both emerging and developed countries is certainly of benefit. Optimization of design and manufacturing will certainly occur. JLR's acquisition by Tata Motors has led to optimization of design and manufacturing. The new signature language that has defined Nexon, Harrier and Punch series of SUVs and certain other cars, and also the underlying Omega architecture are all result of the globalization of technology for Tata Motors. Favorable factor costs also are good economic triggers. Diverse national needs for multi-generation products, ease of doing business in certain countries are the environmental advantages. By being in certain countries, we get the endowments of that country and the natural resources accessible to us. Geopolitical factors could be advantageous. India is really a favorable geopolitical country as far as Make in India is concerned. In terms of strategic innovations, globalization is supported by product standardization, global market segmentation, acceptance of new technologies, and availability of better design and production options. Institutional triggers, local requirements for indigenization. Therefore, there could be an advantage of frugal engineering and cheaper costs. Special opening of markets to enable companies come in. Production linked incentive scheme, as I said, is one such initiative. Red carpet for foreign technologies and investments. Red carpet that is being rolled out for semiconductor manufacture and hopefully for electric vehicle manufacture in future and autonomous vehicle manufacture too. Intention to inject global competition to up the standards. That is the intention that even the domestic companies should enhance their level of game with entry of global companies could be one institutional trigger for the overall globalization. These factors individually and selectively and severally and collectively make globalization a phenomenon that is here to stay. Globalization of funding also is happening. Trillions of dollars of investments are flowing across geographies, and that is a great trigger that would drive companies to achieve global excellence, particularly if they are committed to sustainability and environmental empathy, social responsibility and corporate governance considerations. To do global strategic planning, we have to have a mindset that understands the complexity of all of these things. We should understand local conditions, but also we should understand the global local match. We should understand the inherent opportunities and risks and the seesaw that would happen between various factors supporting and opposing globalization. Therefore, dynamic and agile planning is required to support global strategic development. Assessment of economic and political policies as well as industrial policies is the first step. Evaluation of competitive behavior in a nation. Is the nation wanting to be aggressive in terms of globalization or wants to be a kind of global average? Assess access to governments and institutions. How free is it to talk to these institutions and understand their viewpoint and also make our point? Analyze global and national competitors. Are they interested in the upliftment of the industry towards global standards, or are they interested in protecting just their local turf? That is an important indicator of the global and national competitors that are existing in the industry. After all this analysis, we need to identify the best strategic approach and establish the right legal entity and the form by which you can do the business in India. And that could be in the form of 100% subsidiary, equal subsidiary, minority subsidiary, just a strategic alliance, or a partnership. And there could also be progression from a simple arrangement of partnering to a final arrangement of joint venture or wholly owned subsidiary. The alternatives we have in considering global strategic planning are standardized products and services vis-a-vis customized products and services, broad lineup vis-a-vis narrow lineup, and those technology investment and market barters that define these choices. The more the development of emerging economies, the more the reduction of national differences, the more the industry-friendly policies, the greater would be the opportunities for effective global strategic planning. With this, we come to the end of this very important lecture on the understanding of generic industry environments, the strategic drivers, the strategic triggers, the strategic traps, the strategic pitfalls, and the strategic measures to mitigate the risks, and a framework for good, robust strategic planning in each of the industrial environments. Thank you very much for your attention, and we'll meet in the next lecture.